We are once again with Ross Trethewey of TE2 Engineering up in Boston, and I wanted to talk with him specifically today about this video that you guys have seen, probably if you've looked at all into Makeup Air, which is a video from NS Builders, which is a builder up here in Boston that you've worked with on a couple projects?
Yep.
Okay. And what they did is build the Makeup Air into the hood. And seeing that video, I actually am a little dubious. And I wanted to ask him because, like, this is what you do. You have the conversation. It's a data point. So, like, my opinion of it is I've been experimenting with this myself. And I think that the idea of having the Makeup Air so close that it's actually built into the hood is kind of risky for, if it's a gas cooktop, turbulence of the flame. So it actually deforms the flame and then it doesn't heat what it's supposed to point at.
Yep.
And also turbulence around the cooktop where, like, it would take the cooking fumes and put them outside. But they did a smoke test with like colored smoke bombs. It's a very cool video. If you haven't seen it, I'm linking it on screen right now. But in the video, it looks like it's a 36-inch wide by 4-inch deep slot. And one of the things that we're always trying to do, and I just made this up, you're an engineer for real, so let's ask the real engineer, is I try to keep the velocity of my Makeup Air systems below 300 feet per minute, just like a return would be.
That's good, yep.
So
yeah, that's good.
Okay,
that's
right.
good. Yeah, the lower the better.
So number one, if it's that much airflow, then it can't come out of that hole without going really, really fast. But you told me that it actually showed the same pattern on all that. So I thought maybe they were just testing it in the video on low speed, which would be the nicest speed, where it does what you want it to do. But you actually corrected me.
No, so we tested it on low speed, medium speed, and high speed. So does it work? Yes, it works. Is it the best and most optimal kitchen hood system? No.
Okay.
And so I want to talk about
But the airflow pattern was the same on all three of those speeds.
Yep, and we tested on the front burner and the back burner. We tested on both front and back.
And that was I was like, oh wow, that's great. I was wrong. So now can you
clarify? So let's take a step back. So this was a unique project where NS Builders wanted to be able to say, let's do something creative, let's do something unique. And so we had originally talked about putting in a packaged Makeup Air unit that would have an electric duct heater, put a fan, a filter, and do it the way that we typically do it for cold climates. The company was saying, hey, why don't we take a different look at it? Can we do something creative? And I said, well, we could do something what we do commercially, which is, I call it the hood within the hood concept, where the idea is that you have this large capture hood and you have a perforated grill, not in the hood, outside of the hood. That's where the Makeup Air is provided. And if you do that low enough and slow enough, then you can make sure that you don't have spillage, you don't have capture efficiency issues, and you make sure you get all that carbon monoxide and all the VOCs and particulates, everything off the cooking surface into the hood.
Which, by the way, just a reminder, if you're cooking with induction or electric, you don't get a free pass. You still have to do exhaust, and then because of that,
correct. Yep. Okay. Yeah. And there's a bunch of studies coming out, which I'm happy about seeing the results of, which have not been published yet, that are looking at induction and electric versus gas and looking at particle counts and looking at all that kind of stuff. And so, yes, you don't have carbon monoxide and some of the gas pollutants that you have with gas versus electric, but you're still cooking stuff.
Yeah, VOCs.
And you still VOCs, particulates, and all that stuff coming off. But anyway, so what we said is, okay, if you wanted to do that, so we talked about doing a Makeup Air system where we would bring it into the hood, outside of the hood, but all within a custom hood within a hood enclosure. So when we did the design, what we needed was, for that cooktop, we needed about 900 CFM. It was a Thermador cooktop, 36-inch. That's what the manufacturer says that they need. And that's basically 1 CFM per 100 BTUs. With 900 CFM going through that system, it ends up being about a 10-inch round. You can upsize it to a 12-inch round on the exhaust side, because that's fan-powered with an inline fan that's exhausting outside. The outside air, we talked about doing it passively or with an active fan system. We ended up going with the passive system. In our design, we had a 24 by 10 duct coming in. And so if you think about it, if you watch that video, it ended up being that they installed a 10-inch round going out and a 10-inch round coming in. And so it wasn't exactly per the design. And so we had some kind of issues with that. They said, hey, we'll see if it works. We'll test it afterwards. But it's not the way that we would do it. And so what we're trying to do with the Makeup Air coming in, we want to make sure we don't have more than a 0.05-inch water column, really 0.03 inches of water column of maximum static for a passive intake, right, versus an active intake. Because we want to make sure that we have a very, very low, kind of almost think of like a return air pathway for the outdoor air to get into that hood with very low resistance. That needed to be a 24 by 10 duct. I mean, it's a big duct. They didn't install it that way. So we said, okay, well, we're going to see what happens. They didn't want to give up that much space in the garage coming across. There were some issues with that. But when we tested it on low speed, actually, I wrote down the numbers here.
Nice. We love numbers.
We tracked it. So on low speed, we're exhausting 245 CFM and bringing in 120 CFM. So we depressurized the house to 7 pascals when that was happening on low speed. When we went to medium speed, we exhausted 346 CFM and we brought in about 200. And that was depressurizing about 11 pascals. Oof. And then at high speed, we're exhausting 469 CFM and we're bringing in 254 and we depressurized 15 pascals. And so this is a 3 ACH 50 house basically.
Yeah.
It's around 1400 CFM 50. And so it's tight, code tight, not super, super tight. And so what's happening is we're depressurizing the house when the kitchen exhaust runs either on low, medium, or high. Thank goodness we don't have any wood fireplaces or any open combustion venting or anything like that. We have one boiler that's direct vented with concentric kits to the outside. But the depressurization is way too high.
Yeah,
for
that 15 pascals is enough to backdraft a power vented water heater, which a lot of on-demand water heaters are piped with one PVC pipe. That's power vented.
That's
Two
right.
PVC pipes, sealed combustion. That's a dangerous level. Now that house does not have any fireplaces in it that are open hearth fireplaces.
Correct.
Right?
That's correct.
And this is like, if you're just one of those people that are like, I just want what I want, I'm sorry, but you just can't have. And that's where, you rely on people like us to argue with you about that. So,
right.
And the one other thing I just want to point out is 469 CFM exhausted from a 900 CFM fan is that's the highest speed that it can go. Is that loud too when you turn it up to high? it's
actually remarkably quiet because it's an inline fan motor that's in the garage, so it's way downstream. But you keep in mind, a lot of those manufacturers that make those inline fan motors, especially the ones that are provided from the cooktop manufacturer, they're not high static fans in many cases.
Ooh, interesting.
So we're seeing a lot of them that say that they're a 900 CFM fan, but if you actually duct it and measure it, it's not moving anywhere near 900 CFM.
Wow, interesting.
And so part of that is how it's ducted, what size duct it is, etc. But the other part of it is how tight the building is, right? So if you don't have a good return air path around the makeup air, that fan has to pull the air through the makeup air system into the hood and then send it outside.
So the fan is doing that entire... Yeah, it's like I was wondering how you start a train, because it seems like physically you can't, just the wheels would spin because you're trying to pull the whole train at once. Right. So that's what this thing is doing. And by the way, that is a good note for those of you who are like, I want my gas vented dryer or my electric vented dryer. I don't want to go heat pump because I heard da-da-da-da-da. It's all mythology, by the way. You should try it. But if you want to do that, you're going to end up where Scott True did in a video that I'm posting on screen now, where the clothes just didn't dry because the dryer is having to do the same thing, where it's has to pull it in. It's
pulling it under pressure on the house. It's choked for air. Without air moving through that system, you don't dry the clothes. So same thing. You won't exhaust the fumes. When that system's choked off.
So one of the things in sizing the makeup air is that you have to know how tight this house is going to be, especially for passive. Like you don't have to care once it's active because it's like, oh, we're just going to replace whatever goes out. But how did you do this? You're using a tool within REDcalc, which is a free online calculator. I'm linking it in the notes below. But you're using a part of it that I don't use actually.
So the first thing is REDcalc, I just printed these out, has a design infiltration calculation. So if you know the building leakage, which obviously is a big one because if the house is new construction, you won't always know what the blower door test is going to reveal. So you can start with a 3ACH50 if it's a code compliant house, at least in Massachusetts. But when we measure it, when the shell is completed, we'll know. And so in this case, it was 1400 CFM. So you're putting in 1400 CFM at your 50, your building leakage. You're looking at the building height. You're looking at the buildings, whether it's an urban or suburban setting in terms of shelter classification, etc. What you're ultimately looking at is that depending on your indoor temperature and your outdoor temperature, when you want to frame a reference. So sometimes we'll put in the design coldest day of the year, we'll put in the design hottest day of the year, and then we'll put on the day that we're actually doing some of the testing. Because what we're trying to figure out is what is the stack-induced infiltration and what is the wind-induced infiltration. And so for people that don't understand that, the house leaks air typically two different ways. I mean, there's a bunch of ways it can leak air, but generally it's two ways. One is stack effect, which is directly driven to what's the temperature inside versus the temperature outside. The greater the temperature difference, the more air is, like in the typical winter example, hot air is rising, it's trying to get out to the roof. As it leaves, cold air is infiltrating into the house to make up the difference of the air that's lost. So that's called stack effect. The other one is wind effect or wind infiltration. And so if I have a 50 mile per hour breeze on that house, That's very different than a 5 mile per hour breeze or a 25 mile per hour breeze. So I can look at how the wind and how stack affect the infiltration of that building.
And the one that Ross is leaving out is in the buildings that he does not consult on, and where they follow his math and his design, the imbalance of the HVAC system when it's pushing on a room too hard or sucking on a room too hard. That also is going to drive some of that. But again, in a new home that we're talking about a lot on this channel, that's an imaginary perfect place. You can kind of get rid of that.
So to your point, mechanical infiltration is the third item. To your point, so HVAC imbalances, especially if you have, let's say, ductwork that's in an unconditioned space like an attic, especially if it's duct leakage, to the attic space, you can get very different pressure imbalances. Exhaust fans, if you're on your bath exhaust, you're on your ERV system, if it's not perfectly balanced, of course, you're going to drive the pressure one way or the other. So I group the mechanical imbalances and pressure differences kind of into a classification. But I want to look at the building basically before mechanical systems act on the building. So what's the stack effect? What's the wind effect? Then I can look at mechanical infiltration. Cool. And really, you don't know what the mechanical infiltration is going to look like until you test it.
On this design infiltration, the thing that I think is really interesting that could make my consulting better is that you could size this not for the coldest day or the hottest day, which is what Manual J is doing, but also for the dehumidifier load day. So that's not the hottest day. That would be like in Phoenix, for example. I've been using this example. Well, it's 110 on the hot side, but it's 80 on the wet side. So like on that wet day, how much infiltration do we have? That's a good use.
Basically in Boston, we're 91 Manual J 1%. We are peak humidification 1% at I think it's 80 or 81. So it's 80 degrees versus 91. It's
that's
11 degree difference.
And that's not uncommon around the country, by the way.
That's right, especially in the eastern half of the country.
And then you've got this secondary advanced infiltration tool that you're using.
That's right.
And that's just to separate out what is stack, wind, total, and then with the ventilation.
That's right. So we're looking at, with this one, we're getting a little bit more detailed, and what we're looking at is what's the low end and what's the high end for stack, for wind, and for mechanicals. And so like in this example, I can see stack infiltration is going to range from basically close to 0 up to 150 with an average of 61. Wind will be anywhere from 0 to 215 with an average of 38.
Yikes.
And so you can start to see how much kind of infiltration you're going to get on an average day, but on the low end and on the high end.
And this is, by the way, where when ASHRAE 62.2 gives you an infiltration credit, it's going to be an average, not a max.
Correct.
So on those days. So are you actually undersizing, like how would that work?
No,
are
so
you using that
we're using the ERV on the 62.2 from a design perspective, no matter what.
Okay.
But we're putting in ECM motor version units that can be throttled. And what we're finding, by the way, we're finding that ASHRAE 62.2 is obviously a great data point for houses. However, we're seeing in reality, to keep the CO2 and keep the air indoor quality where we like, we don't hardly ever need to run at that condition. So like in my own house, I have the design on mine was around like 120, 130 CFM is what I needed, ASHRAE 62.2. I'm running at like 35 to 40 CFM continuously.
Holy crap.
And I track my CO2, I track my VOCs, my PM 2.5, I track everything that I can possibly track, and my air quality is solid. It really is solid.
Filtration, and also, do you have kids?
Kids.
Yeah, kids. Okay, opening up, closing doors all the time.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we're moving and going all the time. We're on the go. So that does help.
So you can either get an ARV or get some kids, and you'll be fine either way.
Yeah.
One is way more expensive.
So could it have been improved? Absolutely. Could it have been designed and installed better? Absolutely. The way I think we were thinking about it, Nick was building it for his dad. It's actually his dad's house. So he was willing to say, hey, let's push the envelope.
And maybe the dad didn't care too much.
Exactly. He was like, Nick, just do whatever. Just do what you want.
Do your thing.
Do your thing. And so he was allowed to push the boundaries and envelope in certain ways. And so that was one of the ways, because we say, look, this is not installed the way we designed it, number one. Yeah. I'm curious if that was to be a 24x10 duct as opposed to a 10-inch round of the makeup air, what that would have done, or how that would have looked differently. Yeah. But yeah, it's one of those things where the hood within a hood, the risk is high, especially if you make it active, because if you blow air through that slot, you do have a risk of spillage. And so the best place for makeup air is, of course, on the other side of the kitchen. Bring it in at anywhere from 200 to 300 feet per minute, low velocity, let it diffuse and let it come right across the room and get exhausted out the other side. That way you're getting all of the contaminants, everything captured in that kitchen, and you're bringing it up and out through the kitchen exhaust hood. And ideally, it's filtered, preheated in a cold climate. You know, obviously dried in
all the expensive things that you love.
Exactly.
Here's a question for you: island kitchens. Mm-hmm. I'm always telling people that you have two tools to work with. You got fan power and geometry, and if you're going to completely abandon geometry by putting an island cooktop in, then you have to have a massive fan. Is that also your?
I would agree, but inherently you just don't get the same capture efficiencies with an island hood system than you do with a canopy or a wall mounted system. You think about it, if you got your cooktop against a wall, of course that becomes a natural block.
It's a trap.
It's a trap, and now you can put the oversized hood in, deep volume, put in the right size exhaust fan, and then you have a chance of getting your capture efficiency above 70%. Mm-hmm. If you're doing island hood, a lot of studies I've seen, you just don't get anywhere close to that. You might get 20, you might get 30, even if you put a big one in, even if you ramp up the CFM. A lot of them are so high up off the cooking surface because nobody wants it down low. So you're fighting, and a lot of those are slim profile, modern looking. So it's like you literally have like one issue after the next fighting you. Not enough volume, not enough airflow, too far from the cooking surface with no boundaries around it. Your chances of success are pretty low. With island hoods.
So as far as this video goes, I really liked the video. You should check it out. It is an option, and if you did it according to the math, what the math says, then great, it can work. But like, there's a trade-off, and I think that the lesson with his dad is that it's a risk assessment. That's what Ross is doing. That's what I'm doing whenever we work with clients. Is like, how much do you cook? And if they say, I don't cook, then it doesn't matter. None of it, it's all academic. So it's like, if you dry clothes 1 hour a week and the clothes don't come out dry, you could just put them on a line in the backyard. And that's like, is that acceptable to you? And if it is, great. Then the questionnaire that we talked about in the last video with Ross is like, perfect. Just tell me how easy you are to get along with and you know how flexible you're going to be. And if you're not going to be flexible, let's talk about that.
And the other thing I'll add is some people ask me, hey, why don't you market this hood within a hood concept? Why isn't it market available that I can buy it? The challenge, there's a couple things that people don't think about. Number one, if you have a cooktop that's on an exterior wall, you don't have the space to get separation between the intake and the exhaust, and you don't have space to put a makeup air damper or do any of that stuff. If you think about it, right? Your hood is, let's say it's on an exterior wall with your exhaust going out to the outside. You don't have space for air to come in that situation. There's not enough space to do that. I think the hood within a hood really only works when it's on an interior wall, and you have, in this case, a garage that it backs up to, because then you can get creative and start running some ductwork back and forth across that ceiling. And you also have noise. Anytime you're putting a hood with, that has a fan inside of it, you've got noise associated with that type of concept. And so, if it's loud, no one's going to run it. So I always tell our staff, if you could build the best and design the best kitchen exhaust system, if it has the hood inside of it and it's noisy, no one will ever run it. They just won't run it. And we're seeing that come out in various studies where 10, 20, 30% of people actually run their kitchen exhaust fans when they're cooking. Like, it's that low of a percentage. A lot of it because people, number one, don't know that they have a kitchen exhaust fan. And number two, a lot of them sound like a train going by, so they're never going to turn it on.
Annoying.
So
great. So keep on researching. What you are doing right now, learning about this stuff yourself and empowering yourself, is the right step. Go ahead and keep on learning. Keep asking the experts how this stuff works, especially actual professional licensed engineers. Tune in to our channel. Make sure you're subscribed. Like, comment below if you have anything to add about this discussion or about that video and any extra questions that we didn't get to. Tune in next time.